Hi there, welcome back. As you can see, I went ahead and fitted the radio back into its cabinet. This is following a suggestion that I got from a couple of people on the comments section. And the suggestion was, fit this in, tie this down, because sometimes these barrel connectors start acting up simply because of the instability. They vibrate really, or they shift or twist when they're not fixed down. So I took that bit of advice, and that entailed doing quite a bit of maintenance or housekeeping here, because to put this in I had to finish a few things, and I'll show you those in a second. But the one I want to show you is what's happened to the barrel connector. Now I've got the signal generator is putting out a 17 megahertz signal with a tone modulated on there, and I'm going to put it on. It's just coming out and is going to a bit of wire. This is sort of acting as a radiating antenna, nothing special. I've got that thing tuned to exactly 17 megahertz, which is on shortwave 3, which is one of the bands that was causing a problem. And as you can see, we can hear it. In fact, if I touch the antenna, or rather the emitting antenna, I get it even better. So it's receiving, right? And I couldn't figure it out. I figured, well, okay, I fixed it. And then I decided to put this on. And the sound goes down, obviously, because it's suddenly, basically this top end, all the switches here were acting as another antenna, but that's fine. This thing's got 2 screws on here. And you've got to cover this up to reduce noise. Okay. Now I'm going to increase the amplitude of the signal just to make sure we can hear it. And we can, right? So I'll tighten these guys. Boom. Dead. Loosen it. We got the signal back. Do this one. Dead. Loosen it. Got the signal back. So I figured, what the hell was going on here? So what I did was, I got this thing out again. It's basically what I thought happened was, this thing is causing this thing to sort of shift. Okay, but I needed to find out which one it was that was causing that shift. And that's where the challenge comes in, because I really didn't know. And the way I figured it was, if I switch this on, or put the volume up, and if I twist this guy, so what I'm going to try and do is put it the other way around so that I can see the insides. Now this is obviously causing something to twist in here. There we go, I've got it. So just a very little bit of pressure and I'm twisting something in here. There. Now I went along and I touched these guys, pushing them in with a wooden stick, just touching them, to see if one of them was the problem. And that's the guy. So that's the guy that's being twisted out of shape, as it were. And so I know now which one is the problem. How to fix that is a different story. I really don't know. Now, I know it seems to be touching. If you look at it, there's not much give on there. But for some reason, when this thing twists out of shape, and it doesn't have to twist much, that's what happens. And I'm a little baffled. I've actually thought of putting a rubber grommet or a rubber washer between this thing and the screws, and to see whether the twisting doesn't actually twist the entire chassis, because it's literally 1/2 a screw turn makes a difference. Pull it away and it's gone, and I can't see that this thing can be twisted. This one is one of those that looks like it's been bent out of shape. It's been sort of elongated, and I'm really afraid to mess with it. So I'm going to look at this a bit more and see if I can't find a solution. Well, I think I got it. I get lucky sometimes. Okay, this is the logic, and it's a bit weird. I thought if I did this so that contact down there was actually below the neck of this guy over here, and then if I grab this guy there and push it in, then I'm sort of bending it in using that little button as a pivot point, and it seems to have worked. Because now if I touch it on the channels that weren't giving us anything, there's shortwave 3, it stays. Now we've got to put the cover on and see if it makes any difference. I think we got it. That's bloody brilliant. Okay, I'm pleased. Bloody hell, that's good news. That is very good news. Okay, let me show you what I've done, because a lot has been done to this. Just to get it inside, you've got to do quite a bit of stuff. And there were quite a few things that needed doing. Let me show you one at a time. First of all, starting at the back here, I connected the antenna. This thing was basically re-screwed at the bottom and shifted to the right position to give me the right height at the top, and then screwed in tightly over there. So that was done. The shortwave antenna was also shifted up. If you recall, there are 2 screws at the bottom, which you can't see right now. But those 2 screws allow you to shift this whole antenna connector bracket up and down to get the antennas to come in and out. So those are now properly fitted and tightened. All the wiring on there had to be basically re-shifted. Those cables coming through there had to be pulled down a bit on the other side to allow the speaker to come through. I hadn't counted on that, so now that's been done. Bringing this thing back into the cabinet from the back is quite a chore. You have to be incredibly careful because these have to come through that gap. The meters to come through exactly where the opening is. These guys have to come through, and so this is not as easy as I thought it would be, but I got it in place. Everything is nicely fitted. It fits perfectly. And then of course I went and put in the knobs over here, as well as these 2 on top, which I've just noticed are actually the wrong way around. The top one's got an orange ball in the middle, and that's wrong. It's supposed to be the white or the yellow should be at the top, and the orange is the FM should be at the bottom, and it's supposed to, I think, correspond to the color of this dial, of this FM dial. I'm not sure, but I know those are yellow and orange. I've seen some white and orange as well. And then of course everything cleaned. You have to clean this glass very carefully before you put anything in. It'd be stupid not to do that, since you've got it open anyway. That was properly cleaned. The knobs were also cleaned, because once you've got this thing in place, it's a real bitch to take out and clean up some thumbprints you might have forgotten on the inside of the glass. So that's where we are. The handle was stuck together. This handle was basically pulling apart. So I stuck that together and did a very gentle clean with IPA of the whole chassis. And it looks good. It looks really good. So that's another step forward. Now there was something else done here which I'd left for last, and which I don't think you'll actually be able to see right now. I fixed the dye lamps. Now, when I say I fixed them, I actually converted them. These things use, I believe it's called the 5.5mm, but it's bayonet lamps. They can't come out too far or they'll hit the side here. So they're very special lamps of sorts. I really don't know what they look like, and I don't know where to find them. And I certainly don't think they're made anymore. I might be wrong. If I am, please tell me in the comments below. But what I've done is, I needed to get I needed to convert this to LEDs, which made sense because they should last a lifetime, and they draw very, very little current. Because they're only used when you push that button down, the current consumption, the actual working life of this thing is not much. So what I did was I got two ultra bright white LEDs. I basically blurred the lens with the Dremel. In other words, I sanded it a bit to make the light dissipate a bit better. And then I found these, they're actually sort of grommets that you use to fit LEDs to a panel. You drill a hole, put this through, and the LED fits through there. And I found these particular ones that fit into that hole where the bayonet lamp went. And then what I had to do was I had to put the light bulb or the LED going in, so the positive goes and touches the flex plate at the back, which is the positive of the supply to the lamp, where the lamp would be supplied. And the negative is actually the rim around it. So I had to bend the negative back and make sure that when I pushed it in, it touches the edge. One thing to be careful of is that edge, that ground, that negative minus 1.5 is what it would be, is not actually ground. It's not 0 volts as relates to the entire chassis. In fact, that thing comes down from 12 volts, positive 12 volts and 0 volts. The battery is at 12 volts and then minus the battery voltage. So the negative of that battery is actually at about 10.5 volts, higher than the chassis. So if it shorts, it's going to blow something. So very carefully, I put that in. And the idea now is, in the place of the battery, in the battery compartment, it's made for those A cells, which are quite big. The idea is to use one of these things, which allows me to put 3 AAA cells in here. And that gives me 4.5 volts. And I need 3.2 volts for the white LEDs. That's the voltage I've got on the power supply that I'm supplying it at the moment, at the back. And this thing is almost the same size as in terms of height. So I've got to find a way of making this thing fit exactly into where the A cell slot is, with enough pressure on the top and the bottom to make sure the contacts are made. And then the owner can do one of two things. He can keep replacing these batteries if and when they wear out, which will be a long time coming. Alternatively, this, if he finds lamps for this, absolutely no modification was made on the front panel. So he can just remove this, put the lamps in, and use a normal A cell, which is 1.5 volts. Now, the LED needs 3.2, which is why I'm using this, but I still need to put a little current limiting resistor between one of these legs and the battery clip, because this thing is 4.5. So the way to work it out is, let's say I want 10 milliamps coming through the lamps. It's 4.5 minus 3.2, which is the LED voltage at 10 milliamps. And then what you do is you divide by, basically the voltage drop becomes 4.5 minus 3.2. So 1.3 divided by 10 milliamps, that's about 130 ohms if I'm not mistaken. Something like that. And that's what needs to be fitted into this unit before it becomes a new A cell that miraculously produces 4.5 volts. And so that's another step in the right direction. Let me show you if we can see it. I've got the power supply connected to the back at the moment where the battery goes in for the lights at 3.2 volts. And can you actually see it? So in the dark, there should be enough light to light the panel, I think. Anyway, there aren't that many options for this, unfortunately, unless I can find the lamps, and then I need to remove this whole thing again. But at least that is now completed. I just couldn't get myself to put this back with these two gaping holes there with no lamps in them. So that's where we are so far. I now need to work on the back panel. And this thing has absolutely nothing to do with the battery wiring that we have here. The only wires you'll get from here will be the plus 12 volts and plus 1.5, which in this case will be 4.5. So the positive supply goes to that one pin, one socket thing there, clip. The negative battery voltage and the negative supply voltage. None of this will be necessary over here. So I need to make some alterations on here. I need to use that kind of clip because that's what they're clipping into the board with. Because the line supply, in other words, this thing, which is what you supply 12 volts on here with center positive, is completely independent from the batteries. In fact, it's operated with that battery and line switch over there. Whereas before, even when you had a supply over here, the radio still believed it was getting battery supply. Then, of course, there's something else I want to do. There's always something else I want to do. I've got to fix this mess. I don't like this. So I might just find a little black plate that'll match the back of the cover and somehow get it to hold in there without making any more holes. In fact, the idea is to close the holes, not open any more. And we should be good to go. So you've seen the housekeeping chores that I carried out on the back of the radio. But there's some more. This is the actual back cover. And if you recall, there were all those holes. The original holes weren't a problem. The problem is that somebody had actually made some more. One of the ideas was to put they put a power supply socket in there. They didn't even bother to put a round one, which you could just use a round hole for it. They also made a couple more holes. Don't ask me why. So I decided to put the cover on. And the way I put it on is this is a plastic lid. The idea is that I wanted to keep it as close to the look of the back as possible. And then on the inside, the mess is now sort of hidden. And the way I did it is I glued with hot glue from the back onto the plastic lid. I put some metal clamps on there just to make sure that this held properly. And then I dropped this in. This can very easily be removed. The hot glue gets melted and you can actually push this out. So the next thing I'm going to do is this hole where the cocked up power supply jack was on. That's where I'm going to put the new power supply jack, and that's the only thing that's going to come out the back. The other thing was the battery connectors. Now the battery connectors were quite interesting because they'd been botched up to include this DC jack they had on here. I've done away with that. I've put it back to the original. So the battery connectors at the moment are just battery, and these are the three connectors that go to the battery connector tags on there. And you've got the positive, which is a common positive, and you can see that the positive from the 8 cells, which is 12 volts, joins the positive from the 1.5 volt cell, which is for the lighting. Those join up and it comes out here. So effectively you've got 12 volts, and then you've got the 0 volts of the 12, so this is minus 12, and this would be minus 1.5. This is the lighting connector. Because I'm going to put in that 4.5 volt cell, this is where you'd get minus 4.5. Now, if you use the common positive, you've got to sort of think of this, as far as the battery connector is concerned, as a common ground, but at positive as opposed to being negative. That means that positive is 0, then this black one is minus 12, and this white one is minus 1.5. That means that between the white and the black one, there's a difference of 10.5 volts. And you've got to be careful you don't short them. That's why that connector in the front where the little light bulb goes in, you have to be very careful you don't short that to the ground, to the chassis, which is at minus 12 volts. So it looks pretty neat. It fits nicely in there. The length of this was chosen to give us enough leeway to plug it in and unplug it without creating too much of a pack around here. You've got to be careful here because you've got a tuning dial for the FM over here. You've got very sensitive RF circuitry over here. And if you put too much wire in here, and when you close the cover, you've got to tighten it, you could actually create a problem. You could actually create a short, or you could do some physical damage to that tuning dial. So I've tested this. The only thing I need to do is I need to make the hole for the DC socket at the back, which is fairly easy now because this thing just comes out. You don't have to, unsolder anything. You just remove the nut and it comes out if you want to separate the back cover from the radio, which you normally wouldn't. Normally it would be like that. And now we can do that. And what I've done is I've cleaned up the back as well as the top. It's looking a lot neater now. And other than the testing, I'm not sure what else I need to show you. I can't believe this thing has come to an end. It's one of those things you never really want to finish. But the owner is obviously anxious to get his radio back. I would be too if it was mine. It is at the moment, not for long. Just want to test that it works on battery. Remember, we've been working with the line input. So I've connected 12 volts from the power supply to the battery clips, the end of the batteries. The batteries would start with a negative here, go through there, and all the way back. This thing is the wrong way around. Things you discover. So negative, 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 and all the way there, that's the positive. Now what I need to do is I need to switch to battery. Beautiful. And just for your information, it's drawing 30 milliamps at 12 volts. So it doesn't really draw much current at all. So battery's working. The line connection's working. I just need to fix that 4.5 volt cell. I've got to make this into effectively a D cell battery. I think I said A cell on some other video clip. It's a D cell battery. It's about 30 millimeters by 60, but I need to put a current limiting resistor before the end there, and then that will fit nicely into the lighting cell port over there. Now, getting this thing, 4.5 volts, 3 AAA cells into there, was a little bit of a challenge, but as usual, one does find a solution. I found one of those vitamin tubes, which is exactly 32 millimeters thick, which is the width of an A cell. And it's got a lid on there, which actually comes in very useful. The trimming on the lid had to be cut a bit. I made a hole at the top there. I put the negative up there, and it actually holds it perfectly, which is quite nice. Positive is down here. Now, on the bottom of this, I've got a washer at the bottom, tied through to a washer here with a bolt, small bolt and nut. Rounded off, in other words, ground off some of the end of the screw, or the nut, sorry, of the bolt. Rounded that off, and now this thing fits in there. And we've got ourselves an A cell. Make sure you mark it, because you don't want to get this the wrong way around. And if he wants to remove it, he just does that and changes the batteries. Now, you'll ask, where's the current limiting resistor? Well, I tried all sorts of things to fit it in here, and I couldn't. So I ended up opening this up, and I put the 65 ohm, I want 20 milliamps, I put 65 ohm in that white line, and wrapped it up with some heat shrink, so that this 4.5 volts is current limited when it gets to the diodes, to the LEDs. And if anybody wants to restore it again, they just open it up and they short out that resistor, and it's quite easy. And now this thing just fits in here like a normal battery. Let's have a try. The spring at the top, the negative spring, fits into there, and voila, it's in.
Todos os operadores da justiça, nomeadamente o juiz, quando vê a prova em julgamento, porque há o princípio da imediação da prova, pronto, apreendem essa prova, assimilam, recebem, consomem essa prova de acordo com a sua convicção pré-formada e de modo a encaixar esses elementos na pré-ideia concebida que têm. E o que é que dá asneira? Porque a ideia é precisamente a inversa.
Gil Figueira da Foz, RFM Somni, o número 1 na escolha do consumidor.
Então, vamos ao que interessa. A empresa, que decorre já há algum tempo, o diretor-geral avançou esta semana que está em preparação um processo em tribunal devido à alteração do modelo de mobilidade e o pagamento.
Okay, let's try shortwave 1. What the hell is that? That's on 27.2 megahertz. Never heard that before. Not much, is it? Shortwave 2 coming down from 25 to 20 megahertz. We're going to do shortwave 3 coming down from 20 megahertz to 16 megahertz.
كيلوهرتز لشمال غربي أفريقيا. ساعتين فتبث على 3 فترات. الفترة الأولى من الساعة 4 إلى 6 مساء حسب توقيت جرينتش بذبذبة قدرها 7300 كيلو هرتز طوال الساعتين و17880 كيلو هرتز طوال الساعة الأولى لشمال أفريقيا وبنفس First time this season for them, Newcastle, a first win in, 5? So a useful 3 points for them. They leapfrog Southampton actually do.
Shortwave 4, coming down from 16 megahertz to 12 megahertz.
Rescue workers searching through the rubble in the dark. Crowds of onlookers wearing surgical masks gathered on the road by the hotel. There were reports of loud bangs.
L'une des premières vidéos prises sur le...
He found not available facilities in every province for the treatment of patients suffering from the disease.
There's a great openness from our hosts.
étroit avec des atteints du coronavirus. Dans quel état se trouvait l'édifice? Pourquoi s'est-il effondré? Aucune réponse pour le moment, d'après les...
aider dans les entreprises parce que c'est sûr que ça nous inquiète. On sait qu'à un moment ou à un autre, on va nous dire que on n'a plus assez de travail pour tous les conducteurs.
C'est un navire de croisière.
Shortwave 5, that's from 12 to 8.5 megahertz.
En segunda división. Al final, Girona 1 Albacete 1. De momento sale del descenso con 35.
Samo o moralnim vrijednostima ne može ili ne želi govori o onima nadmoralnim.
Tadaway Supermedical Antibiotics para Canada, Comunidad de Benco, Wisconsin, Afganistán, Kiev, Sur y la...
This is shortwave 6 in the evening, specifically around the 41 meter band.
4月份根据国家有关法律规定，可能有希望有部分疫苗。
And based on their views on Trump, either for him or against him. And who the Democrats run really want.
从中午就开始，就将更多的时间来教学生写汉字、习书法，更是学校里的第一个学习书法的班级。
Shortwave 7. Shortwave 8. This is broadcast band 1.
Disculpas, o sea, tú mañana le dirías a Sarabia, lo hubieras cogido si hubiese tenido, mira. No, eso, el permiso está asegurado. Nos acumula las sí, no puedo llevar yo a Jonathan allí. Pero
Entertainment España.
Oye, Melchor, ¿se celebra de alguna forma de Madrid el 118 aniversario o no?
No, bueno, lo ha dicho a través de... السمك غلالي جندوز ما تسقسين هذا قناص ددا
El tema de zanjar la polémica, zanjar el tema, intentar centrarse en el partido de mañana y que nada más afecte respecto.
تحديات الحدث انطلاقا من ذخيرتها الحضرية. سلط المشاركون في أشغال مائدة مستديرة
Let's try broadcast band 2.
احنا هكذا غير لازم الزواج برك احنا باش لازم نقولوا لا سوليتود لازم غير الزواج كاين الحباب كاين الفاميليا
Tal vez en ese pensamiento no está que sigamos siendo sensibles y personas que nos afectan todo. Incluso nos afecta mucho más que esas personas las que quieres, las que días de paseo hemos quitado muchos la in que imponen algunas palabras en la vida. Mujeres en el objetivo que hacen.
Ya no te miran, ya no te desean, ya no eres una opción. Tú
has rehecho tu vida.
Que no sé, tú sabes cómo yo
Muy buenas noches.
No conocía a Iker Casillas, no conocía a Rubiales.
En esta historia, que no es de ahora.
Un informe favorable, un informe previo del TAD, del Tribunal Administrativo del Deporte.
Gripe, sí que patronatos más productiva y luego la afectación respiratoria.
Okay, let's try long wave 1. Long wave 2.
Las mujeres no es una cosa que sea una novedad en esta película. En la adolescencia también, los chavales forman parte también de de otros, manifestando que les pasaba a ellos. Pero ahora yo creo que está más definido tu personalidad, la mujer que eres y todo el bagaje que has tenido hasta llegar aquí, ¿no?
Claro. Ahora,
de Liverpool. Je reviens vers David, c'est toujours peut-être l'extra sportif parce que malheureusement ces derniers temps, un peu partout, on le voit, ces problèmes de racisme et le Bayern.
Anything can break a child's heart. And something so deeply, just a casual remark can see a child crumple and
Well, here we are again at the end of a project. Always a little bit strange because this one I've got so attached to that I'm loath to really finish it. But it's actually been quite an education. And I always enjoy those more when you learn stuff. And the result has left me very, very satisfied. Very pleased, as I normally say. So let me just recap. This thing came in, no sound. Supposedly, well, apparently, the owner put an external speaker on there, and it went poof, and then it went to a tech, and I think it went to another tech, and they couldn't get the audio in, they couldn't get anything fixed up, so he got it back. And I think he'd sort of planned the funeral already, and then he found out that I like to mess around with this stuff. So when I got this, I opened it up, and if you recall, I saw a total cock-up that had been made on the boards. The wiring had been put in haphazardly just to give it back to the owner. And, they figured, well, nobody will ever know. It just didn't work when it came in. It doesn't work when it leaves. Who the hell's going to find out this has been messed around with? Well, we did. It was totally cocked up. The audio, the AF board and the regulator board had to be practically rebuilt. There were no output transistors on the board at all, so those had been pulled out and not replaced. The wiring was totally cocked up, and also the back of the switchboard over here had been messed around with and basically left halfway through some thought out process. I don't know what it was. But anyway, that was redone, the board was redone, voltages checked, new transistors put in. They're actually the original type. So I was fortunate enough to get them. You can still get them. And we've got the audio board working. We've got that tested with the phono tape input. That worked very well. There was a lot of problems with the switching. Cleaning was done because it was noisy as hell. Some of them were getting stuck. And all the wiring from here to the AF board had to be redone. So that was all done. That was all fixed and sorted. And then I went and checked the IF. The IF was out. It was actually tuned to 453. I retuned it to 455. Now somebody had played with one of the IF transformers. This is the AM IF. Someone had played with it and it just got worse. So I adjusted it to 455, and then somebody mentioned something and it got me thinking that perhaps the way this had been set up, because two of those IF transformers still had the wax in there and it was basically tuned to 453, what if that had been a compensation for a slight deviation on the dial? And I checked it, and in fact what I did was, and I didn't report this, but I retuned it to 453, and I found that just about all of the dial accuracy came back. Certainly improved the dial accuracy. It wasn't badly off on some of the channels or some of the bands. It was slightly worse than others, but it wasn't bad. But when I changed the IF to 453, I actually corrected a little bit of error that was on the dial. And that is great. So thank you. I can't remember who commented on this, but thank you, because what it meant was I didn't have any intention of messing with the front end. And it is a very, very good explanation on the service manual as to how you tune the front ends for each band, one at a time. I didn't want to mess with that because I had the problem with the drum switch. My fear is that something was messed around there. I don't want to play with the barrel switch. I had that problem with the one contact. We sorted that out, and I didn't want to change the front end for the sake of, half a millimeter of inaccuracy on the dial. However, with changing the IF to 453, I corrected some of that, which is great. So thank you for that comment. It helped. It actually improved a little bit on the result. The other thing was the BFO was completely kaput. Absolutely no BFO output. It was sort of coming on and then not holding oscillation. So the transistor was blown. That was fixed as well. It was tuned. I have tried it. I've done some demonstration on the reception demo, a couple of places where I managed to find some amateur bands, and you can actually tune in with a BFO and the band spread. You tune in and you can actually get sideband transmission coming through clear, which is actually just a great bonus on this. So what we have is the whole radio is working. The indicators are working. The other challenge was the light bulbs. There were no light bulbs. So I converted that to LED, but I had to increase the battery voltage because LEDs need about 3 volts. These need 3.2, and you can't get those lamps. So I put in those LEDs, and I built that sort of DIY D-cell battery at the back with 3 AAA batteries inside, giving us 4.5 volts. And so now the LEDs work. And you can sort of not see it. And basically, I think that's it. So everything works well. The sharp and broad works well. The battery. I made a complete revert to the whole thing back to the original, which is that the battery line brings 3 lines. It brings a common positive, it brings the minus 12 volts, and it brings what used to be the minus 1.5. It's now 4.5 volts for the illumination. Those are now alone. They're coming back by themselves into the back. There's no link up with an AC, with a DC socket at the back, which is what they had. The DC socket at the back that I've put in there on a little plate that covers some of the holes that somebody had drilled, that DC socket brings in what would have been the line supply. So when you use DC socket, 12 volts, no more, you put it on line. When you use battery, you just put it on battery. So that's working perfectly as well. The dial illumination works either way because it's a separate supply. It's that single 1.5 volt cell. I think that's about it. As far as the rest is concerned, there was a bit of the one wire in the ferrite antenna was just flying around in the wind there. I had to check schematics and find out where it went back. I think I got it in the right place because it does work. However, this radio is working very, very well with my mini whip. Where I am, I get 3 stations on FM, and I get obviously shortwave. I need a better antenna. I've got a mini whip antenna. I've got a long wire as well, which is hidden under the eaves of the apartment building without my neighbors knowing about it. But I prefer the mini whip. It picks up very well. At least sort of, the lower bands, long wave, short wave, long wave and medium wave are great. But I use it actually all the way up. I noticed that when I get past about 12 megahertz and I switch over to long wire, it actually improves reception slightly, but not enough for me to sit there flicking backwards and forwards. I just leave it on mini whip and I use mini whip for everything. The one thing I've discovered today is that in here for FM, I improved reception quite dramatically by using that mini whip on the dipole input, but then converting the input there to long wire. Go figure. It works better than the dipole that I have in here. It works better than the 2 extendable antennas on there. It's got the 2 FM extendables and the shortwave extendable, which is about, I don't know, 1.5 meters high. I don't get too much joy from that. Maybe it's where I am. The reception with that antenna is not that great for me. So I just stuck to mini whip, put it in there, and it's worked all along, and all the demos were done with that, as you probably see if you look at the front. So what can I say about this? Well, quite a lot that I've said already, obviously. I've been waffling away like crazy, but I tell you, this is an exciting project. This was a really exciting project, and now this has become one of my favorite radios. And typically on an island of 280,000 people, the chances of me getting another one of these without buying it to repair are pretty small. But I can honestly say I've studied this probably almost as much as the designers when they designed this thing. I've read up everything I could on it. I've got various versions of the manual and studied it like I was going to do an exam. And I guess I was. And this is the final paper. So I want to thank you all for your patience. I want to thank you for the comments I've received. You won't believe how effective and how useful some of them are. I really appreciate it. I try and respond to all. I sometimes don't get that far. But they are helpful, and they do help me sort of keep things in line, keep logic, keep my head on straight. So thank you again for your patience in following the series if you have. And if you've liked it, please subscribe, share, like, and all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel financially, you can do that on Patreon at the end. The link is at the end of the video and also in the description below. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.